Welcome to a really exciting, different format episode of Beyond Ray. We were so honored to be invited to Western Washington University up in Bellingham to do a live episode for the students there. And we brought my coworker, Sena Janky, an alum of Western Washington University, to talk about her experience and about design as a whole, to answer questions for the students live. It was such a great experience. The students really brought a great energy to the event. We're over a dozen episodes in now, and I think nothing really compares to that live feeling. It's challenging and really fun, and it brings a whole new dimension. So we're so pleased to show you that today.
Well, now that Ginger has the keys to her car,
Holy oh,
and then the other thing that we haven't really talked about, and I'm guessing, well, I don't know, was the tour of the facility. I know it was really late afterwards, but I just thought it was great. It's very different from when I went there. They've shuffled things around, so it was just really great. I'm glad. I really appreciate you guys. I think the professors and the students really enjoyed, sharing that with you. So that was fun. I was totally beat by the time I got home, though.
yeah, that was a long day. But it was nice, you're right, to see the department. I'd never seen the facilities before.
I was a little jealous. I mean, UW is amazing, such a proud alum, but it's very cool that they're in the School of Engineering.
No, yeah, there was some cool stuff. And yeah, definitely, I say live events are challenging, but the most challenging part was just apparently locking my fucking keys in my car like an idiot.
Gosh, that was
We
chaotic.
recorded it now. It's like I can't ever live that down. I've just done that.
Oh, I mean, I guess I was about to say everybody's done that. I haven't done that, but it seems like a really common thing to do. I'm sure I will now. I just jinxed myself. So, oh man,
That's what Margaret has to look forward to now that she has a car.
no kidding. Yeah, all the tickets in Seattle. Yeah, the professors were so wonderful. I mean, like I've heard about them obviously, but it was very cool to finally put a lot of faces to names. I was so moved by the turnout. I just feel like the students are so engaged to be coming to an event like that after school, and like the questions were really, really good. Yeah, it just
Yeah.
felt really wonderful to be like connected with everybody that was part of that program.
It did.
Shout out to the students because like it's a tough life being a student and then going to extra stuff that's not your class. It's not for
Mhm.
money, and there was no free food.
I know we should have given them pizza. Sorry, guys. But also then, of course, the most design student thing ever was like walking up into the building afterwards, after the event, and they're all back in the studio. And I was like, oh, I remember this. Wow, you guys are hardcore. Wow.
Totally.
Yeah, it's kind of like inspiring because we don't do that anymore.
When we were talking about, oh, what's the difference between designing as a student and designing as a professional? It's like, well, hopefully you have a little bit more time management skills as a professional. Sometimes there's a hot deadline where, but it's not like burning the candle all the time as so much when you are a student. It feels very much like that.
hmm
I just miss the doing it with other people feeling too. Like
Yeah.
it's so special. I will stay up late sometimes for a personal project I just get really engaged with, but it's just not the same as like grinding in that room.
With your cohort. Yeah.
Yeah. So if any students do listen to this, cherish it because it's very special.
Well, I just wanted to just say thank you guys for having me. I was just such an honor to be a part of this. It was super fun. And I agree, like, this is my first podcast, so I don't know what it's like not to do it live, but it was just really exciting. And I was just super happy to be part of it.
I think the students were really, really lucky, and we were really lucky to get to hear just like how deep your knowledge goes, how much you've been living and breathing this for so long. Yeah, it was very special.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that like the best part about the pod is how much of it is like real, honest stories. So like I don't think we try to jazz things up or make design sound overly fancy or put it on a pedestal. We want to tell stuff that's really real. Like sometimes it's not fun. You make the banana loca whatever
Oh, gosh.
injector product, or you make different colors of treadmills for the seasons. But overall, like there's so much to this discipline that it's still a lot to be celebrated, this experience, so that the students have so much to look forward to.
Shout out to Lindsay. The banana logo injector also came up while we were live, of course.
I know.
And I just
bring it
have
up
to
so
say,
much.
it's such a, Lindsay knows that that's a funny project and she removed herself from it as well. However, just really need to say what a phenomenal designer she is and like how intentional and deep her projects are these days. Because we're teasing that project and obviously it has no reflection on like what she does and is capable of.
But yeah, and like also to say that lows in your career that designing stuff you don't love doesn't mean that
Mm,
a year after that or even sooner you won't be elsewhere designing something that you do really love and care about.
yeah, so true. And it's actually helpful to like find out what that feels like and be like, not this, we'll not be doing
Yeah,
this again.
just get some perspective, get some learning under your belt.
You have to have kind of a graveyard of stuff. I mean, like I did like an ab cruncher, like the stainless steel. I remember flying to the Midwest for like a special powder coat paint that was
Wow.
like I went and visited a vendor. It was like a big deal. Like what color is this ab cruncher going to be? How the cushions around the elbows, feel and
Oh my gosh. My context for that device, I think, is from like 10 Things I Hate About You. And the dad is using it in the movie. That's so funny. Oh yeah, we've all made some questionable things. I don't know, maybe not you, Ginger. I feel like you've been in a pretty
No,
solid
I
company the
I
whole
don't
time.
know. I feel like there's like weird not everything's a great elevated thing.
Yeah.
sometimes it's just a decal, something that has a
Yeah.
decal on it. That's one of my first projects at Fluke was like a box with a decal on it.
I think the other funny thing about design when you're not really doing something that is the most high-minded, but you're working at a place that values design, fortunately, is like everyone looks at you when you're supposed to make like a little rubber plug or something stupid. And they're just like, what does ID think? And it's like, this is so beautiful that you care that I think about this and that I have a deep opinion. And now I gotta prove it to you that I do. I gotta live out that prophecy. Design has to care about this deeply, right? And I'm like, yes, let's subject this to some testing.
That's right. Check one, two.
Check one, two.
Yeah, does it sound good? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here. Ginger and I did both go to UW, but we are also IDSA student members, and so it's really important to us to be here and like help support what you guys have going on. Yeah, the podcast we started mainly to focus women that do ID because we really want those stories to get told more often. And we've been doing it for about a year. It's been really wonderful. And this is our second live event, but the first local one. So yeah, Sena, thank you so much for being our guest tonight.
I'm honored.
Anything you want to add, or should we?
Well, I think we'll just end up talking about this really awesome program that you guys have here that, spawns awesome people like Sena Janky. And then we will have time for you guys to ask some questions. So that's going to be really important to us. So, think about what you want to know. We're going to talk about some stuff that I think is already important to you guys. And we want to hear from you. So stick around for that.
Absolutely. So yeah, Sena, will you start us off by just giving us a bit of a broad overview of your career, and then we'll dive in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out as got an internship at Precor doing exercise equipment between my junior and senior year. Fell in love with the idea of kind of helping people become better versions of themselves through exercise. One of the designers I worked with, he left that company and then went to go work for a fitness equipment manufacturer in Logan, Utah. So after I graduated, I did interview other places. I ended up getting a job there, and that was great. I was there for 2 years. But I was really ready to come back to the Northwest. So at that time, Fluke had an opening, came back and became the mistress of multimeters, as some of my friends like to make a joke about it. And then I was there. So Fluke at that time had what they called like a kind of a special Phoenix team where they were looking at new business opportunities. And at that time, it was in the networking space, doing copper, kind of what we consider IT infrastructure today, copper networking, and then it turned into fiber optic tests. And that spun off into a new company called Fluke Networks. So our design team at Fluke, kind of a couple of us broke off and started this new company within the same building, but we were a separate company. So that was the first time, because it happens again in my career, where I was working at a company with kind of a startup within the company. But my total time there was about 16 years. I had a great run, but I was really kind of ready for something else. I wanted to maybe get into more managing people. I had an incredible opportunity with Milwaukee Tool to be their first interaction designer and start their interaction team, which was going to be based out of Bothell. But shortly, 3 months after I left, they closed the Bothell office. So then I was left unemployed looking for work, and I landed in the medical space. And I worked in the emergency medical field for a company called Physio Control. And there, again, this is the second example where I was working for a company, but there was a startup within that company. And I was working on what was called a wearable defibrillator. So it was kind of this vest, lots of fabric with electric therapy attached to it. And worked there for a while, and then eventually had some people asking me to do some moonlight work, and I was just at a time where I was ready to kind of see what's next. So I left and started my own business, Connect Design, and did that for 3 years and had a great run, did a lot of consulting and a lot of research. Actually, that's also when I just did a ton of research in the medical space when I was consulting. And then really one of the things that brought me back to Fluke was I was really, as much as I liked running my own company, the pandemic hit. And I also didn't really like working by myself. I was starting to really think about partnering, looking for other people to partner with. And then that's when the pandemic hit. And I was like, actually, I'm just looking to be part of a team again. And then that's when I landed back at Fluke. And with the specific intention of also wanting to manage the UX team. And so that's where I am today. So that's kind of a quick
Powerhouse over here. Wow.
Yeah, a lot of not consumer experience encapsulated in your career so far, and you seem to pretty immediately latch on to some convictions of like products that are going to make someone's life better, that they become healthier using, and like what are some of the touch points that you felt like this is a value that I can carry through, or this is how I'm making a decision to direct your career?
Yeah. So I talked about how I was really attracted to the idea of like making someone's life better, going into exercise. And so I ended up at this exercise company, but they were a consumer exercise company. So they were very seasonal, and their market was like Walmart, Kmart, Big Five. And so every season they had to put out kind of a new version of a treadmill, which I wrestled with because that wasn't really what I was envisioning. And then they thought that I was really strange because I wanted to go running on the treadmills, like at on my lunch hour, to like understand like how things work. They have testers that they would bring in, but the actual employees didn't usually go run on the treadmills of
Like,
these.
no, this is not for you.
Right? Because I think it was really, it's a consumer thing, right? They're not meant to last necessarily forever. Like Precor was very much, at least at that time, industrial for clubs. And then I did wrestle a lot with some of the material used in or the waste, I guess, when you're doing all these 3D models as an industrial designer, you need to go through all those iterations. But it was also kind of this mixed feeling of like seeing this pile of landfill that did lead to this beautiful end product. But that was one of the things that I have always really enjoyed about Fluke in the industrial space, or Fluke Networks also, was they were developing tools because there was a technological need to put something out into the world. It wasn't a seasonal change. There was a consumer demand for something that they were looking, and that's kind of has helped guide where I end up. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. What are some of the other through lines, when you've made these transitions into seemingly or potentially unrelated areas, right? Like I have to learn a whole new skill set to do UX or to go onto this small team instead of this big team. What are the ways that you make the decision? Like what drives you into that next phase?
Yeah, so for going from industrial design into UX, it was just a career growth opportunity, especially because we didn't have any UX designers as part of Fluke Networks, this other small spinoff. And so the industrial designers kind of carried the UX. We were responsible for the UX, and which wasn't really a big deal in the beginning because it was still mostly like buttons and knobs and things like that. But what really kind of took it to the next level was when we got into touch screens and our products became more software driven. And that just kind of led then to me like, oh, this is an opportunity of really caring still very much about the end user and their workflow and making sure that it's trouble-free if possible.
And some of the distinctions, like when you started going into the UX space, did you get really excited about learning to think in that distinct way? Or was it sort of just that you had the same skill set you could apply to any problem? And so you were like, well, somebody needs to be doing this.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. Like I was excited to grow in a new way because I had been doing industrial design for quite a while at that point. So it was like a new skill. Working with software engineers was a whole new skill versus industrial designers. You work heavily with mechanical engineers. As a UX designer, you work heavily with software engineers. They have an understanding the constraints that they have. Also, the other thing that's important to understand is, well, you have software, then software in and of itself is a whole nother family because you have you have firmware engineers that run that run on hardware, but you also have software engineers that can run web or mobile applications, and there are different constraints to all of those. So just learning about that ecosystem and what can and can't happen, and sometimes there's a lot of constraints that drive the design.
So you got to kind of work and transition from ID to UX at a time where like there weren't UX degrees and there wasn't really UX as a discipline and as teams and companies. And you went from doing that yourself informally and then doing it very formally and then building teams of it. So like, how do you think that space has transformed and like, how did you respond? Was it really natural feeling and you kind of rode a wave? Or was it like, oh, this is overwhelming and you had to learn a lot of stuff?
I would say, first of all, like even the work, like from a UX, from hardware, working on an embedded device. When I say that, I'm talking about typically like oftentimes a medical device or an industrial device where you have a job that you need to complete. And it's on the screen and also a combination of buttons. That made it easier to transition versus I think the training, the education that happens now and the degrees that you get has nothing to do with devices. I think it's all like websites, enterprise software, huge, still very much workflow driven, but they're not necessarily burdened with thinking about that big picture of like that big system of things, like understanding that the user, I mean, that's one of the things as an industrial designer, you're thinking about kind of this stepping back and really looking at the big picture. What do they have in their hands? What are are they carrying a pencil in their mouth? Or they have something tucked in their hard hat or in their belts? Kind of this big picture. What are the things that they're juggling? I think if you are designing just straight like a mobile application, you're not thinking about that. So that is something that I think industrial designers can really bring to the UX table, I guess, thinking about that system.
What do you think, if any of the students in this audience are interested in taking on that career change or expansion, what are the areas that they're going to have to develop in a lot, though? Like maybe they have this strength you just mentioned, and what is missing?
I think that's a good question. I think that like having really strong visual design skills is that's just such an added value as a UX designer, where your work sells itself because it's very visually appealing. I use the term reducing cognitive load. So when I was working in the emergency medical space, we were working on these defibrillators, which are the mobile instruments that a paramedic uses that have paddles and deliver energy, shocks to the human. And so we were working on this big touch screen, and it was really like you have to boil everything down to make sure that you're providing that paramedic with really clear, simple information. And so I guess getting back to your point about what kind of extra classes or education. So like visual design, I think research component, UX research is great. I think that is obviously a component to, I think, the design that you guys are already doing as part of your design process. So that carries over really well. But then continuing to strengthen that and understand how data can also help make decisions. I think corporations really like to see data. So understanding how to use these tools to drive the design, I think is really important.
So maybe something that students are often really concerned about is asking the best way to also present that and portray it in a portfolio. And are there different approaches to if you want to appear really generalized and that you can do both ID and UX, or to showcase one as a strength and supplement with the other? Do you have any recommendations in that regard? I mean, you and I both look at tons of portfolios.
Yeah.
It's happening a lot right now.
Yeah. I would probably, that's like, I guess I would try to really focus on where your passion's at. And then it's okay to sprinkle in something else. But I think too watered down is not going to serve you well. You don't come across strong at anything then. So I would, have a focus, but then say, but I can also do this if that is something else that you're looking at.
It feels like we should throw the question back to you. You look at a lot of portfolios, like you said.
Put me on the spot. I like really complete stories. I think everyone that looks at portfolios is a little bit different in what they're looking for, and so you always have kind of a toss-up. You can kind of look ahead and try to research who is the hiring manager for this, or find someone give you an informational interview at a company, of course. But definitely, I think you can tell, like you said, when a portfolio is kind of watered down or isn't true to someone's message or core values, it's pretty obvious, versus when they definitely care about something and they want you to know, that's very strong. Mm-hmm. And I think ultimately you could run into some companies that are just yeah, this person's, I don't like the way they think, and that's not going to fit in with this company. And if they turn you down, that might just save you both a lot of heartache. And so to just feel fine about being turned down for being authentic, mm-hmm. and then when you do get to a place that's excited about it, it's going to be a fantastic fit.
Yeah.
I have to channel my Margaret and say it's like dating.
Yes. Yeah, it's like dating.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about this story development in general as a really, maybe when you're talking about portfolio, it's common to get told, that you need to develop the story of each product, and it's sort of simplistic, but can you talk more in depth about how you develop your core story, your values, what this through line is that's going to tie together your thinking anytime you show up in a new project, and how any designer, but these designers as well, could really start to express that or identify what it is for themselves?
Yeah, I think, we've talked a little bit about this. Your story is all that you actually have, so you can't really, I think the worst thing that you can do is compare yourself to others, but at the same time, it's great to understand what other, your classmates are doing, to see where you are and where maybe you have gaps. I think, so that there's an important understanding of I like how, Ginger did this in her portfolio, or I like how she told that story. But let's say you all have an assignment to do a telephone or a cell phone. It's if everyone is designing a new cell phone, then how are you going to set yourself apart? You have to rely on your storytelling skills and understand what it was about your phone that set you apart. And I think the other thing that's important is when you get feedback, if you get feedback, take it to, sometimes there's portfolio reviews and you're going to walk around and get feedback from different professionals. Every professional may tell you different things. So you are really going to have to take that feedback and figure out what you're okay modifying, or maybe not modifying at all, but what is your story that you can fall back on and just really realize that is that's what resonates with you and who you are as a designer, and how you're going to make decisions, and make that part of how that comes through, that through line of your portfolio.
I've definitely talked to some people in and outside of design that when it comes to forming opinions, or maybe having an emotional response to something and being kind of passionate, they're very level and they don't necessarily have a strong feeling either way. If someone says this is what I want you to do with your portfolio, and they're just yes, sir. And then someone else says a contrasting thing and they're guess I'll do that. And then how do you cultivate that sense of self? Like, I have very strong emotional reactions to like everything I could think of. So it's kind of foreign to me. I think ever since I was born, I'm just like, this makes me angry or this makes me happy. But if someone's pretty like neutral on so many things, how would you tell them to cultivate that sense of self?
I mean,
to
it's
be
bigger than just
strong
design, of
against-
course.
Yeah, it is bigger than just design. I think I would look for opportunities to just, just building self-confidence and self-esteem. Try new things. It doesn't always have to be design. You can try new, go out and try rock climbing or go ride a bike if you've never ridden a bike before, but just find ways to push yourself and feel confident. That's going to, I know my examples are pretty elementary, but anyway, but that's going to feed into how you present yourself.
Yeah, you can go ride the treadmill or run the treadmill.
I mean, I think I want to think about it, yeah, maybe back in your career or like on a further along place, right? So when you've had to make these decisions about your next step, you're like, oh, I want to manage a team. Why? Like, what is that inner voice that is telling you that that's a hole that you haven't examined yet, or,
Yeah, no, I was just ready. So I've always really loved people. I didn't know I wanted to be an industrial designer. Actually, I forgot to mention that. I came to Western not knowing. I was thinking I wanted to be a teacher or an engineer, and I was taking a calculus class, and I loved math, but I was super slow. And Millie Johnson was my math teacher, and she was amazing. And she pointed me to the tech department, and she was like, "Have you thought about taking a class in the tech department?" And I was like, "No, what's this?" I didn't know. And I took an introductory. At that time, it was like video editing, graphic design. It wasn't even ID yet. It was just some kind of sampler.
what is the tech department?
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. So the Ross Engineering and Tech Department here at Western
cool.
is where industrial design is part of. Yeah.
Great.
No, great call. And so I took an intro class and I got like an A+. I killed it. I learned a lot. I took Arunas's class and I made paper airplanes on the first day of class, spent 4 hours making paper airplanes, and we flew them off the building. And I was like, this is interesting, just different. And I was hooked. I had the most amazing professors here. I did fall in love with geology along the way and had to make a decision if I was going to do geology or ID. But other things came into play as well that kind of forced these decisions. Like I ended up being an RA, and I couldn't go on an outfield geology. I'm spacing on what it's called, but when you go out in the field for geology. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to be an RA, so I can't do that. And that just kind of led to ID. And then, anyway, back to your question about managing people. I think that, it
was because you were an RA.
It was always something. I really care about people. I really want to make someone's life easier, if that makes sense. I'm really excited about that. Like, I think I'm excited to figure out how to optimize and try to help, my team do a better job.
I hope everyone in this room gets to experience a manager that loves people. It's not 100% common. It's not guaranteed.
Yeah, loves the work of,
and it's hard. People. It's hard to manage.
I will say that I guess another important note. So I left because there was nowhere for me to go at that time, because my boss, who is amazing and who I had worked for 13 years, he wasn't going to go anywhere. He was happy, and there was just nowhere to move within that company at that time. And but it took me 7 years between when I left and when I actually ended up finally managing a team of people. And I had been interviewing and got for multiple positions during the 7 years, and always would get to like the top 2, but I was always lose out to someone who had management experience, even though they're like, yeah.
That's tough. Like, how do you prove yourself when you're trying to get this new role that you haven't done before? What are we supposed to do?
Everybody here, probably.
Yeah. You have to find someone that is willing to invest in you. Or like when I came back to Fluke, I made it really clear that I wanted to manage a team within the year. So I started out as a senior UX designer, and then within a year I had kind of proven my value, and they promoted me to that. So
Can you talk a little bit about some of these frustrating points actually in your career, like when it's been 7 years and you're not hitting that goal you want, or maybe when you got laid off? I think, especially, I'll speak for myself, but I think that going into the real world of working, there were, yeah, it's just not as consistently like that you're doing this dream project that you really want to, get across the finish line. The timelines all get longer, and you're contending with a lot more variables and more people's demands on the product.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I think what was important for me to be involved in other things. I do Expanding Your Horizons conference where I work with a dear friend of mine who I went to school with at the industrial design program here, Kristen Wells. And she and I, for 20 years, have been putting on a seminar called Design Studio, and where we teach young women in design from high schools all over about design thinking, and we have them do these exercises. And we have them, I think, for a little over an hour, and then they rotate like I think we have 4 hours or something. But to have something that you do like in your life, but it also ties back to kind of networking. Talking about unemployment, I think it's really important to keep in touch as much as you can with your classmates above you, below you, in your class, who's graduating or whatever. You don't know who's going to be your boss. And so all of that, it's a small world, it's a small world to begin with, and design is a really small world. So I would just keep that in mind. You don't know, the person who you don't like in your class right now may someday be your boss. And so how are you going to deal with that? Or it's important to network. And that is actually how I have survived, is through my networking.
I'm sure you all love each other. I believe in you.
Yeah, although I want to say that I think networking to me when I was in school seemed like, oh man, such an inauthentic thing. And actually, maybe by doing projects like the one you just talked about, doing this podcast, for example, networking becomes like much more fun and natural, and just like you're forming actual relationships with people. I think everybody that we've had on the show is a really good example of somebody that we've networked with technically, but have formed like a really authentic relationship with. So that's something I always want to point out about networking, is like it gets more normal the older you get, and the more you have like a natural exchange of
or planning a social event, a meetup. I mean, like, you're relying on people, like, just even, it doesn't even have to be a big thing, but just engaging. Yeah.
But I think a big part of this is also managing expectations beyond school. Like when you're in class now, I think it's easy to take it for granted that you see your classmates, the people in your cohort, like every single day, even weekends, and they just like maybe never go away. But when you go out there in the world and you have your job, and maybe the design team's not so big, and you're like 6 designers for an engineering wing of like 100, 200 people, you'll feel a lot more sparse, and it's maybe that whole thing of like keeping in touch with each other is going to be more important, and kind of leveling your experience of like, what is someone else at a different company or a different level of role going through, and how can that inform you and support you, right? Like, because it can feel pretty lonely as a designer sometimes. That's a big thing of what we're trying to bridge with the podcast and the experience of specifically women in design. And also that, when you're not surrounded by designers, everyone here, I think, loves design, and we really like support each other. Maybe we don't always love each other or necessarily agree with everyone's work, but we're all here for design. And then when you go and work somewhere, maybe it's really engineering led, and that's not going to be 100% aligned with design, or it's really product and marketing led. It's not going to be 100% aligned with design. So cherish this time where everyone's like, yeah, design, we're on the same team. And then you'll have to navigate some of that murkier. It'll be uncomfortable, and that's where you have to have that strong sense of self, I think, to like stand up against those other competing forces and things that are obviously important for launching product, but like,
well, even when you have a design team, you're all working on other stuff, so you don't necessarily work with your buddy who's also a designer, and so it's important to reach out. I mean, there are touch points, obviously, where we're all together, but it's easy to go through a day and not talk to a designer because you're talking to engineers and you're talking to product managers. Or
I have never worked on a project with Sena.
Yeah.
We work in the same office, and I see her and talk to her.
We wave.
But yeah, we don't even work together.
Yeah, what are some strategies you've picked up along the way about this, you know, design evangelizing? What works, you know?
I think actually it's a pretty realistic expectation. You guys should all just plan on evangelizing design for the rest of your lives. You guys always have to fight for it, even at a company. So Ginger and I work at Fluke Corporation, which has had design there since the 60s. And you would think, and it feels like it's pretty established, but we constantly have to evangelize for it, and it's not a given. And so look for opportunities where you can talk about design, look for opportunities where you can give, tours, bring in, people from the outside or students and share. I think that goes a long way. Even it's just like social currency, and other people in the larger organization see it and they learn about design through seeing that you're evangelizing it. It just never ever goes away.
Yeah, and I think again, when you talk to designers and with each other, it's easy to, click right away, and you're talking about surfaces and textures and forms and proportions. And then when you go and talk to even your closest compatriot, discipline-wise, the mechanical engineer, you're going to have to learn to speak their language a little bit. And like really great, awesome mechanical engineers will learn about design, but sometimes they won't. And so you'll have to kind of like switch your hat up to mechanical engineer hat, try to occupy that space to be friendly, to sort of like meet them in a different place, right? Not necessarily in the middle, unfortunately. But if they're really cool, the middle, yeah, or maybe even better, they'll be like, I'm getting ready. I can even sketch. I don't know. Sometimes it happens.
I was so motivated listening to when we talked to Jackie. She's a CMF designer, and she believes in the value of every detail of the product to a degree that like I can't even fathom. Like it matters. It's not even a question of like if she thinks it matters. It's like her reality is so sure, you guys should go back and listen to that like this thing has to be in 6 colors, and if we remove one, the story is gone. I think to like have that level of conviction in what you're doing is really incredible, and maybe you still need to like learn to be flexible enough to not die on every hill when you're in your company, but to believe that in your core at least, so that you know how to access the like really compelling argument in the boardroom, is quite cool. I want to turn back to your relationships a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about some of the people that have been really impactful on directing your career all these years?
Well, I would probably say the one that was probably one of the key ones was Wayne Hoofnagel, because he was my boss for a really long time. And I had a young family, and I was able to work 4 days a week for probably at least 7 years. And that wasn't necessarily a fluke thing. It was a Wayne. It was when we were at Fluke Networks, but it was really a Wayne thing. And that really changed my life, right? Because I was able to continue practicing design. And I know a lot of other people don't have opportunities like that. So I have a lot of fantastic women in my life who either they became stay-at-home moms or they work full-time too. And so it was just a really deciding. I felt really lucky that I was able to have a day with my kids and do volunteer stuff at their school. So that was one person for sure. From a UX standpoint, Joseph Ferrante, who is still at Fluke, he taught me a lot about early on in my career about user interaction, and that really probably laid the foundational groundwork for me to just think of like, oh, this might be something that I want to do. From our UX research side, I would say I worked with in the medical when I went into medical. I worked with some amazing human factors engineers, and they really taught me just like the rigor of UX research, human factors research, especially in the medical field, the value, the reasoning, the justification. And I've really tried to carry that through. So those are, and I would say actually, the professors, the relationships that I've made through, going to school here.
Yeah.
So
you did mention to us when we were having drinks the other day that there was also like a cohort of women in your class that was really remarkable.
Yeah, so I graduated in 1995, and Our class, we had 11, and 5 of us were women, which was, I think, unheard of at that time. It was always either 1 or 2 women up until that time. So we were almost 50%. And, I think, I can't remember what we were talking about, but I don't know if it was because I had like 4 other females in my class that we just didn't even think about it. But we just talked a lot, and I feel very lucky to have gone through that class, and I consider them all friends. I'm closer with a few of them than others, but it's been great to see everyone's careers, and where we are almost 30 years later.
Yeah, that's quite cool.
So yeah, and they were absolutely impactful too. Yeah, 100%.
And remarkable for them to have careers too, considering some of the statistics. It's not, no one's career is guaranteed.
Well, and the careers have been in different, like we've all, I think, if you take the 5 of us, I think there's people that are doing, technical publications, product program management, photography. So they've all kind of gone in different directions, but still design was early a foundation where everyone did industrial design and then kind of found other things that kind of fit their lifestyle.
We gave some time to UX, so I actually wanted to also touch on research. If anybody here is like noticing that in a lot of projects, that's the thing that's sparking their interest, how would you encourage people to pursue that more as a niche?
I actually figure out what is it about that you're looking for? I guess, is it something that you're just looking to complement, or are you looking to, get a degree in that? I guess that would be, I think, the big thing distinction. Thank you.
Yeah. What does a degree entail for design research? Actually, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so I guess I would think a master's degree.
Yeah.
And so I know at UW they have the human computer interaction, HCDE.
HCDE, yeah.
Yeah. And or actually human factors, a master's. A lot of it is, I don't have a master's, so I don't know what it entails. I don't feel like I can speak to that, but it's just another level of rigor. And so I think you can, I would say I got mine on the job.
Nice, yeah.
And so that's how I can speak to it. But I think it gets you to a little bit more understanding of what are you looking for? Are you looking to do how people make errors, and then understanding and collecting that research so that you can give it back? I do have friends who are in research at Microsoft. And so, they do all kinds of tests. They provide the feedback. And then a lot of times it doesn't get implemented because, it's not a priority. The prioritization happens. But then I have friends in the medical field, and that's, a lot of heavy, regulated, needing to understand if people can actually operate this thing without errors. And that's, I think, really fascinating and
I'm kind of curious with all of you. Do people already know? Do you imagine going to more school after this degree? Maybe show of hands if you think you will. Okay, cool. I'm just curious how that is shifting. None of us have. I haven't gone to extra school. I don't have a master's either. But I feel like the longer design is a profession, the more education is getting added in. So just curious.
Yeah, just a few years ago, people were like, masters? I don't know. And then now it's becoming pretty commonplace to the point where people are like, PhD?
I know.
I've thought about it a lot, and over the course of my career, trying to figure out what's the return on investment. I've thought about getting, a master's in ID, a master's in education, a master's in MBA, a master's in MFA. Which one makes sense for where I might want to go,
But it's unusual for a career. Your career is incredible, and you don't have one, and that is less common than a lot of other fields. Which, yeah, I think we've had some conversations about how seriously that makes designers get taken also in the broader world, which is an interesting
if you have
part of this.
If you have a secondary degree.
Well, I think that the fact that designers often don't impacts the way that design is seen professionally. But in any case, should we wrap up?
Yeah, I'm ready to get some questions.
Oh,
Yeah, great. Well, thank you guys for listening. Yeah, hope that was interesting. Excited to hear what you got to say.
For the live Q&A, the mic setup didn't allow the questions from the students get picked up, so we'll just kind of summarize those really quickly so that listeners know what was being asked. The first question is a great question about design and communication, more or less saying design is really dependent on communication, and we know that throwing more information at someone doesn't necessarily stick. What's a good balance using more or less information in getting your point through?
Repetition.
This is interesting because not too long ago I was reading an article about the cultural differences in UX and how that affects the UX design that you should do. I mean, it can affect not just UX, but like culturally in the Western sphere of things, less often is a lot more. Like when you use a lot of white space, obviously you call a lot of attention to what is there, and that's huge. And then culturally, in like Asian cultures, putting less information is not as desirable. They want a lot of information because they like to just get all of it, which is why when you go to like Taobao or something like AliExpress, the website is just overwhelming to us. But that's actually desired by the users. That's studied and researched. It's not a lack of UX design, for example. So that's something to keep in mind as, you know, maybe you will go off and design in a different part of the world and you'll have to learn a culture that's not what you grew up with, or maybe you're returning to a place and designing for a culture that you know, but you were educated here. And so there will be an adjustment, and hopefully you have the tools and infrastructure in place to do the research to make sure and to verify that your designs are what users need.
Well said.
Just got to throw in my wacky knowledge because I read so much weird stuff.
I think, I mean, yeah, do you want to add on anything? Because you're doing UX work where you've talked a lot about simplifying the basic, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to
Information.
say, like, even in explaining what UX is at our company and understanding like what my team's sharing, like what my team does, and I still explain it all the time. It's not actually just a design problem, like you're saying. It is a communication problem, and I think that's not everyone's always paying attention. So you literally have to be saying it all the time to see, like, oh, so and so was multitasking when I told them the first time during this other meeting, and now I'm saying it again in another meeting, and hopefully maybe they'll pick it up this time. Like, I think you just need to keep educating and iterating, and it's just a big part of design.
Say what you're going to say it, and then say what you said.
I think also it's about, I would make the selection process based on like really good listening and really good attunement to what the person you're giving the information to actually like is going to benefit most from hearing. So yeah, like maybe sometimes in a company, marketing and design are a little out of alignment because one is based on like what the consumer benefits most from, and maybe one is more about what's trying to be sold to them. I think if there's like a lot of mixed information, it gets very convoluted. So you do want to tailor the way you communicate, either to be like really, really clear on your story or really, really clear on what information is going to be the most digestible to the audience that you're trying to target.
They asked a follow-up, do you see yourself as designers or people who take information and translate or communicate it?
I totally see myself as a designer. I mean, that's just a piece of it. But I think the other thing is we still are creating output. I mean, like, all of that is just part of what we deliver.
Yeah, there's different stages. You know, if you're blessed with a design job that will let you do the whole process, then you're definitely going to find yourself at the parts where you're not making anything, you're just doing some research, you're running tests. And I think that there are days where I'm like, yeah, I'm a designer, I'm in CAD, I'm drawing some stuff, and you know, I'm understanding a user journey and a story here, there's a narrative. And then there's other days where the entire, like a small team is all researching and we're all kind of working towards a shared goal, and I get really frustrated. I'm like, I'm the only one that understands this information. You all sit down and listen, and I have to like explain it. And there is a certain way that I think designers are taught to think and to digest information that you like start to simplify and spit it out into something that's really simple, but not just simple for the sake of being simple, simple because it is actionable. It turns into tasks. It turns into, this is something we don't know, so keep going on that. This is something that we can now disregard. This is something that needs further testing and it needs this output. And then you have a game plan and you can keep going with some forward momentum. That's not a skill and not a way of operating that necessarily other disciplines have automatically or out of school.
I think I feel like a designer, and I do, the tasks like sketching and CAD and all that. But to me, being a designer, at least in the companies I've worked in, has really meant like being an advocate for the user, being like the person in the room that actually is the most motivated by that, and just trying my hardest to communicate with all the skills that I possess, why that matters and how to make it the most seamless.
When interviewing for a design role, the designers that worked at the company weren't that enthusiastic about their job. Is that typical? Are designers just burnt out in general?
Are you saying that the designers were like they were tired of the work they were doing, right? You're not saying they were tired of your work or something.
The student explained they weren't tired of his work. They just saw their own stuff as maybe a not so fun job. At the very end of it, he kind of is just like, is it just like tiring to have a job?
Well, that's a little bit true. I mean, school is more fun than when you are, I think semesters, like the transition from being sort of, I have these projects that last for 3 or 4 months and then I'm on to the next exciting thing, is very different to be in a rolling cycle of like making continuous products.
And where you have like something might take years.
Yeah.
Right.
And or just like get nixed. I mean, sometimes. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that's very normal. Like maybe you just caught him on a bad day. I don't know.
I feel excited by the products that I get to make. I think that there are more exciting phases in the cycle than others, and they last longer than they did when I was a student. But certainly there's still like a lot of things that I get excited about making. I do a lot of like personal projects in my free time, which is exciting. And I think that finding like external outlets like this project, the podcast, that keep me invigorated about design itself, and maybe like what it means to create community in design, which is a real value, adds to it. So it gets like maybe a little bit more broad than just if I like the thing that I'm sketching every day. But I love being a designer and I feel really invested in the work that we do.
I think a lot of people in a lot of industries right now have a hard time for various reasons, and it's not necessarily 100% work related. I mean, the world is a pretty wild place right now. As for your experience with these people that you interviewed with, I think it's really unfortunate because I don't think that's reflective of the hiring process across the board. And I think what I will say is hiring is a skill. And, running an interview, running a group interview, and, at a corporate gig, HR is very involved. So there's a lot of training and there's a lot of like, this is how interviews should go. And there's a very like, we'll say like all the political correctness and kind of just making a good experience for the interviewee, and a legal experience is one thing. And then as designers and as stewards of our industry, how we want someone that doesn't work with us to perceive us is, I think that that's important. And if someone's kind of lost sight of that, that's really unfortunate. If they're just having a bad day or something, I think they shouldn't be in that interview if possible. Yeah. And that's something where kind of the lead on the hiring should manage that process.
It might be indicative of the company. I mean, it could be too. Yeah. Like sometimes designers feel more valued in some companies. And so like if everybody you talk to is miserable, maybe don't work there.
Maybe it absolutely was a red flag for sure.
But if you were really still like convinced somehow about that company, or you really want it to be a good place and you need to know more, then I would try to find an informational interview, like something where you can be really candid with someone on a one-on-one basis. And they'll tell you the good and the bad. And so there was also a question about how do you find work for companies with similar values to yourself, specifically ecological ones?
I think it is really prevalent, but I think that there is also a lot of work being done in the sustainable space. I think there's tons of material exploration that's happening, and there's a lot more awareness. So, I mean, there's still a need for us from an industrial designer standpoint. There's still the need for form giving. Like you need to have a 3-dimensional object to really no matter how good it looks on the computer, there's nothing like holding something or walking around a vehicle or whatever size and scale it is. There's amazing tools today with augmented reality that have all these things. It's super close, but there's nothing quite the same as like interacting physically with an object. So I guess to answer like how do you move forward with these kind of struggles, or how do you use those as an internal compass, would be, that's going to be your journey, right? Like you're going to have to figure out how to navigate that and look for companies that are intriguing to you, that are doing the work that you want to be a part of. Or maybe you can be a steward. If you go out and educate yourself and say, I am specializing in this and I want to do this for your company. I mean, those are, I think, a lot, there's so much more awareness around that. But I don't know. I'd love to hear.
I think if you want to be like assured that that'll be part of your work or part of the business, maybe not even directly your work, then, companies that are B Corps, companies that advertise their values, and especially if it's something that they're sort of promising their shareholders, then they're going to measure it and in some form be held accountable, and you can play into that strategy. It will be an opportunity to you at that company in some form. And I would say that even if you go to the worst rolling coal company, I don't know, it's disgusting, you could always see as that is like the low-hanging fruit of this can be improved. And so then you could take that on as a potentially very difficult mantle. So it's depends on like, is it about how much impact you personally want to make, or is it about maybe like a harm reduction of like working for a company that's already aligned with your values?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's also about the product that you make. Like, probably prototyping is a little actually less of a concern than a company that just like wants to have more profit by like releasing 15 cycles of the same thing and just like making mass of it. We had somebody, Lindsay, this woman that we interviewed, made like a banana injector, like a plastic thing that like filled banana cores with Nutella or whatever. And it was really demoralizing for her, and it wasn't the prototyping that was hard. It was like just being part of making that plastic object, because she's like, this doesn't matter. I think the more you feel like the thing you're making is actually should exist, the more tolerable it is to deal with the waste. And yeah, I agree completely that you could be one of the people that helps also impact the waste.
The next question was, when and how do you know when to make career transitions?
I've asked this question to people that I respect multiple times, and a lot of the common answers is something around you can self-assess for if you're learning, if you're growing. You can be aware of this, and then when you feel like that's kind of drying up is when you should look for a different opportunity. And that doesn't necessarily 100% mean quitting and finding a new job. There are other ways that you can fulfill that, but finding a new job is probably one of the most common ones, and represents potentially the most financial growth for you. And that's a good indicator. I mean, there's other things like if you are at a job that you're fundamentally unhappy at, then maybe you've always been looking for a way out of it. And then if you aren't growing and then you aren't sure how you need to grow, you need to identify that before, to me, you need to identify that before making a move. Maybe some people are just like, something's wrong here, nothing's moving, guess I'll leave. That's scary to me, but some people do that.
I quit my job this summer.
I think you knew what you wanted.
I don't mind. Yeah, I think that it's values. So actually getting to the question that you just asked, you're realizing that you're running into fundamental, like, oh, I'm dissatisfied at this point with the thing I'm making, maybe, or I just have grown away from it. Learning is crucial. So maybe you can make a few new opportunities in the place you are, but when you realize you've maxed out on like learning from the people that are there, learning from the cycles of the things that you're making, and there's nowhere else to go. You were talking about management and how you had to leave to get that opportunity. The last one that I feel like I would not have mentioned a year ago, but that this woman, Angela, that we talked to really made the point for, is just like, yeah, you you would like to be more financially stable, you would like to like move to a new city, you'd like to have a new experience. Like there are really valid reasons that are not from something being wrong. They're just because like you as a designer deserve to develop in those ways.
I think the other thing is like if you feel like you don't have the tools you need to be successful. And so one of the things I have always been a pretty much a people pleaser type person. I like to do good work and make other people look good. And but one of the skills that I've really learned more later in my career has been when to say no and those boundaries of like, actually, this is what I need to be successful. And I asked for those things, and I was it was like yes but no. And that's when I realized that was a forcing function into me starting my own business, because I was asking for what I needed, and I was just like, I don't understand how I can be successful given what you're asking. And it was a clear indication for me that I was like, okay, I'm ready for a change.
Yeah, it's just another relationship, right? Not even necessarily with the people that are managing you, but with like the company as an entity and what the capacity of that place is too. You know, like you don't have the power to shift what it is or what you can do there.
We also had a question of how to become more creative, how to be more aware of problem-solving opportunities.
As far as ideas for becoming more creative, I don't think you can go wrong with getting outside, to be perfectly honest. I think that is a great medicine for getting inspiration. I have not done this, but it's on my list of things to do. Is actually I've had friends that have had great luck doing improv from a UX perspective and from industrial design perspective, but just practicing. I think it goes back to that evangelizing piece and getting up and talking and working out that skill and being creative and just receiving and giving verbal, being spontaneous and funny and silly. I think that's a whole different muscle that we aren't using. And I can't speak from experience because I haven't done it, but it's on my list of things to do.
I was about to like ask you to demo.
No, I know. It's on my list.
Yeah, I'll second that about going outside, but maybe also in the context of just getting new experiences. If you feel a little stuck, then just seek something out, whether it's reading a book or listening to new music or just talking to someone about an interest that they have that you don't know about. I think that can, I don't know, just tickle your brain. To me, a big part of that too is it's very conscious, like a very conscious choice when I do those things, and to be sort of like appreciative of them. And I think that type of mindset can kind of open you up to being a little more creative and to sort of seeing opportunities, and that it's a better way to say like, oh, this is a place where I can solve a problem and take an action, instead of seeing, oh man, there's something wrong here and I'm upset about it, or like this is just bad. And it can be easy as a designer, I think, where a lot of your job is focused around critique, that you're like trying to find everything that's wrong with something and then to fix it. But starting out with like expecting wrongness maybe can put you already in a bit of a rut. That's my strategy, at least.
Yeah, let the creativity come out like wherever it is wanting to come out. You know, like I don't know, sew and sing and just do dance, like do other things where it just feels good to be making and like creating. And I think that the only times I've had any sort of like creative blocks or detachment from that capacity is when there's like a really, really narrow channel I'm trying to hold myself in, where I like must produce in this particular way in this particular timeline. It's always really liberating to just reconnect with the general feeling of like learning and exploration and creativity. So I think it's like about not being hard on yourself about doing it the right way, and instead realizing that they're all related to each other.
Kate's being really modest because she goes salsa dancing and she does ceramics and she can sew amazing fitted garments. So I'm really jealous.
Thanks.
In fact, I think that's just an inspiration. I'll be like, Kate, what are you working on? And then I'll feel better.
I was going to say, actually, just having interesting friends and is actually, and then like, tell me something I don't know about you. You know, I think actually I've really enjoyed this anyway. Ginger and I have been working and doing this, getting ready for this event has been super fun. And we've gotten to know each other a little bit more. It's been fun.
Ginger has a really interesting Instagram account only about tea. She tastes them and like writes up the flavor profile.
I don't have as many interests, but
It's
when I
really
do,
nice.
it's tea.
And our last question of the night was, what is the social responsibility of designers? How did each of us think about that and connect with it?
That's easy. No, I'm just kidding.
Big question.
So, I mean, this is just me. I do think it's important to give back. I mean, I've done mentoring, you know, and I do I mean, I guess part of that's somewhat selfish because I get also a lot from doing that. So it may sound like it's social responsibility. It's nice to do that, but what I get in return is also a lot of fulfillment. But I do think just, you know, it gets back to evangelizing about design. It is a little strange, or maybe not strange, but it's interesting. Like, I'm super excited to be here today. I did not have someone when I was in school that had a career in ID. There was one woman, Betty Baugh, who did housewares, and that's the only person I can think of that was alive in the Northwest that was doing design. I know that there were other women. I know there were because I've heard about them, but I don't know who they are, and they weren't necessarily involved. So I'm just feeling really lucky that I'm here tonight. So
I think that looking down the rabbit hole of your place in society and social responsibility and maybe like that interconnectedness can be really difficult because of the way the world is today, and it's so complex, and there's so many things where you aren't even directly pulling a lever, but levers are being pulled, and then it's like a Rube Goldberg contraption of like, and then suddenly there's, I don't know, it's a horrible thing on the other side of the world that you can't do anything about. I'm a big believer in do no harm. I think that's something where I'm always looking for, like, you know, is there a better way to live or do my work, and try to be a good person in that way. And I think that design has a good capacity for finding these better ways. But it's hard. I do think there's a lot of peacemaking with, when you go into design, that's really like where the sausage is made, right? When you make products, when you ship things. So you can see some of the ugliest things, I do think. And then you're gonna have to learn of like, well, some of this machine isn't going to stop if you decide to abstain from it, unfortunately. So then where can we make improvements? How can we just find joy in what people are getting out of it? Because it's all going to be a mixed bag. There's good and bad in like everything.
Yeah. I think that like my overarching feeling, both when I'm trying to do my work and then maybe when I'm like involved in community things like this, is yeah, I just really want to make people feel heard, and I really like want them to feel like they have access to the things that I do, the knowledge that I have, like the products I'm involved in. Yeah, maybe that's like the core goal. I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here. I'm so like impressed and touched by the size of this audience. It's very cool. Yeah, and really all three of us have already talked about the fact that we're super happy to be in touch with you. So if there's anything we can do to help answer more questions, or, you know, next steps in the work you're trying to do, you can find all of us on LinkedIn. And then we also have like the WID Instagram that is WID_Seattle. And you can DM us on there. We're pretty active, or I'm pretty active.
Yes. and Margaret, I think.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
I guess just one other note in thinking about I just want to give design a cheer here is that you guys like, design is really amazing. It's an amazing tool. And I will say you should feel great about the foundation that you're getting here at Western. I 110% believe in the program here. It's has served me well. And the critical thinking and being able to take a problem and look at it from all angles and understand the user's needs and really understand the value of research, understand the value and understanding how to build something, being part of the engineering department. Those are going to be skills that set you apart when you leave. And the future is really bright. You guys are it's just be excited. I know the world is kind of dark right now. There's a ton of stuff going on that's out of our immediate control. But I just really think the future is bright for you guys. And I'm super excited to see all of your careers and your profession just take off. So be excited about it.
Absolutely. You will have the coolest jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, our MC.
Yes. Great job. Great job on this event. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to the live episode and sticking around for the Q&A. Hope you enjoyed it. We are the Beyond Ray podcast and would love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram at wid_Seattle and on our website beyondraypodcast.com. Thanks.